What's going on, everybody? Back from Strongsville. I had an amazing, I genuinely had an amazing time. I literally don't remember the last time I had a weekend where I had that much fun. Truly. I haven't laughed that much as I have. In that last weekend, I laughed more than I have in the last 2 years combined. No doubt. These guys, these other friends that I've made through, YouTube and the card community, these guys are the real deal, man. I mean, they're genuinely great guys. And I had so much fun hanging out with them. Now, a couple things I want to talk to you about before we get too far along. First, I commonly get the question when I'm recording my content here with this backdrop, where are you? What's the deal? So I was like, let's just show everyone around, okay? So I'm at school, and I get to school really early, and then I also have a period, like a period of time that I have to prep stuff. So sometimes when I've got a lot going on, like I'm kind of got a lot going on right now, I will record some of my intros and things and comments and stuff at my school. So I was like, why don't I just show you guys what this is? So here we are. This is actually one of my classrooms. I teach in 2 different classrooms. And so I am just sitting at a desk. So that's what's happening when you see me in this setting. So for those of you that have asked and were curious, that's the story. This week I had 5 questions, just 5. In fact, I was getting nervous because I was like, man, there aren't very many questions this week. And it ended up having a 5th. Well, I actually had 4 questions from last week's Q&A video comments. And then there was 1 question that was asked in a different video. So I added that in to make 5. So, don't hesitate to ask a question because, if there's a week I have 2 or 3 or 4, that's what I'll go through. So if you have anything you want me to discuss, talk about, don't hesitate, especially with Strongsville that just happened. If you have any questions about how that went, let me know. I would love to talk about any of that stuff, any topics that you're interested in. Now, I got a couple quick gifts. John, my guy, Kryptonite, he sent me this Lou Gehrig card. He said, hey, this belongs in your Yankee Captain collection. So it's a very cool card. Super excited to get this from the early 70s playing card set. And then he sent me this too, 72 Topps. There was a Babe Ruth Award card. And so he sent that to me. So that was super nice. Again, whenever you guys send me gifts, regardless of what you send, it's very cool. And then Kenneth, he sent this card. Now, a couple of weeks back, we were talking about some of the coolest cards of all time, the most iconic cards of all time. And, a couple of the cards, Oscar Gamble, there was a card, and because of his hair, the Oscar Gamble hair. And so I talked about, like, that's the best hair in a card. And Ken sent me a message. He goes, no, it's not. It's the Pascal Perez. He might be right. And this is cool because it's my first tag card. It's a tag 9 Pascal Perez. So that was very cool. And then he sent me another tag card. This one is an Aaron Judge. Again, knowing that I'm a Yankee Captain collector. So that's a very cool card. That's from the Allen and Ginter set 2022. Very cool. Really appreciate that. I got a 10, a tag 10, so it's got to be legit. And then he sent me some other stuff. He said, this one, a Space Badass. Han Solo is really the coolest Star Wars guy, really. And this is from the Burger King set. Back then, there were a couple of sets that came out. This is from 1977. It's a really cool card. It's actually one I don't have, but I do collect non-sport. And then this was from, there were some Kellogg's cards back in the 40s, and there are a few different topics that they had, and one of them was some sports cards, and in a lot of the sports cards, they had different things from sports, like in football, like throwing a pass, you know, or taking your stance. And so that's where this came from. So that was really cool. I love stuff like that. And then Ken also sent me this, another Kellogg's card. And, you know, about flight and taking wings. So that's very, very cool. So thank you, Ken. And then he threw in, you know, you guys are starting to help me build a pretty cool little hockey card collection with some of the hockey stuff that you have sent me. So those gifts were awesome. Again, sorry about Monday. You know, I just couldn't, I literally didn't have the opportunity to do my Monday video. So the topic from the previous week will get pushed to this coming Monday. Coming up this week, I got another interesting thing going on. So this weekend, I'm setting up at a card show. I haven't set up at a card show since I was about 14 with my dad. My dad and I used to set up at card shows. Oh, we probably did maybe 4 or 5 shows, 3, 4, or 5 shows. When I was younger, we set up and sold some things, and we're doing that again this weekend. It's actually a pretty big show in Sacramento. It's supposed to be 250 tables. And I think there's like 35,000 square feet at the facility. It's downtown Sacramento. So that's gonna be interesting. I'm not sure how much I have to sell, but if anyone in Northern California is gonna go to that Sacramento show, again, it's Friday night, Saturday, Sunday, come by my table. I'd love to see you. Just forewarning, I'm gonna be leaving at about noon on Sunday. I'm gonna leave early because Lucy, my daughter, has a soccer game in the afternoon in a nearby town. So I will be there Friday night, I will be there all day Saturday, and I will be there Sunday until about noon. So if you're thinking about coming to the show, come on by. If you've not picked up one of my T206 cards, I'd be happy to give you one. If you want me to sign it, do that. If you just want one, that's cool. You can check out what I got for sale. I'm setting up with a friend, a dealer, Scott, a good guy who sets up at a lot of the Northern California shows. And then my dad and I are sharing the table. So gonna be a fun weekend. Come check us out there. If you got stuff to sell, I know Scott does a lot of buying. I'm sure that my dad and I might be interested depending on what it is. So bring your stuff on over. We can take a look. I've got some stuff for sale, not a ton. In fact, I was a little nervous because I don't have too much to sell. So I reached out to my buddy Darren at Return to Collecting, and he's shipping me out some cards that he's looking to sell. So I'm gonna have a lot of my cards for sale and then a lot of Darren's cards for sale. So I'm sure I'll do a little bit of a video of kind of that experience that I'll post at some point, maybe, I don't know, either if not over the weekend, then maybe early next week. So I could kind of show you how that went. But if you're in the area, I hope you'll come by. So let's take a look at our first question right now. Hi, Greg. Have a question for you and the Midlife community. If you're thinking about buying an altered authentic card, what kind of grade do you put on it for the value? Do you look at the card, and if it looks like a 2, do you downgrade it by a number because it's altered? Or how would you go about pricing an altered card? I had the chance to buy an authentic altered 33 Gaudy Hack Wilson, but didn't pull the trigger because the dealer wanted 25 more than I was willing to pay. Thanks, Greg. I love and look forward to all of your shows. Ooh, now that is an interesting question. You know, we talk about altered cards. You know, it's been in the topic, has been in discussions, especially everything going on with Kurt's Card Care, which, by the way, Kurt from Kurt's Card Care was at the Strongsville show. Like, I'm sitting there at a table looking at a case, I turn, and 10 feet away, I see Kurt. And I'm like, I'm almost 100% sure that's Kurt. And then he turned and he had a Kurt's Card Care hat on. And it was without a doubt, it was certainly Kurt, no question about it. So that was interesting. But as that topic has come up and as there is alterations to cards, I don't personally, obviously I don't have the answer to this. I don't know the answer. I have opinions. And so I'll share my opinion on it. And I don't know how much help I'm gonna be. I will say this, not every alteration is equal. For one, it depends on what it is. So let me give you an example. If a 1980 1985 Donruss card, a 1985 Donruss Kirby Puckett card, has color added because of the black border. For me, it becomes like a PSA 0, right? Some people call authentic PSA 0s or SGC 0s. That's what some people say. For me, I don't think it's that simple. I think, though, a newer card that is very easy to come by, I would just not be that interested in a card that was altered. A trimmed card from 1981, I would have like no interest in. The older the card is, the more normal it is for there to maybe be an alteration, you know, but also the less I think it matters. That, you know, if you're talking about like a turn of the century card, like, you know, an 1888 Allen and Ginter card, if it's altered, that would bother me so much less than a card from 1972. Because just the fact that the card exists from that 1888 Allen and Ginter set is kind of incredible. So now what you've got is, you know, there's such a wide array of why is it getting authentic. Now you said authentic altered, and which is different than authentic but not authentic altered. I'll give you an example. You know, my good friend Orlando, which I mean, meeting Orlando in person at Strongsville, I mean, he is genuinely an incredibly awesome person. If you don't like Orlando, if somebody doesn't like Orlando, they need to take a really long look in the mirror, because he is a absolutely awesome person. I am truly honored to be Orlando's friend. Orlando has a 1952 Topps mantle. I've mentioned it a couple of times. He's shown it on his show. For me, now, again, I'm giving my opinion here, and my opinion on this is Orlando's authentic. It's an authentic Mickey mantle, which was not, is minimum size not met, right? And not altered, but authentic minimum size. Now we have to remember the technology that was cutting cards way back then is not like the technology now. If you take cards from even the late 50s, early 60s, and you stack them up, they're not perfectly the same size. It's kind of like a little bit rough, jagged, whereas now if you stacked cards, they're like exactly the same size. So Orlando has, in my opinion, one of the nicest Mickey Mantle 52 Topps cards on earth. But it just gets an authentic label. I would pay way more for Orlando's authentic Mickey Mantle than I would for, you know, a decent 3 or 4. I mean, I think it's a really nice card. So in that case, the authentic label, it brings down the value a little, I guess, but it is like a world-class 52 mantle. But when you compare that to something like, you know, a 71 Bob Gibson with marker on the card, on the corners, that, again, it's the older a card is, the less the alter matters. Now, as far as pricing it, again, this is my opinion. My price that I would put on anything probably after 1970, if it was altered, is for me personally. I'm at a show, it's in front of me. I pretty much don't have much of any value for a card from, you know, 1977 that was altered. I personally would just have no interest in that card. Other people would probably look at it and go, well, if it has nice eye appeal, great, and they might consider it like a, you know, a PSA 0, so worth a little bit less than a 1. But if we're talking about a Goodwin Champion set and the card was altered, but it's gorgeous, I would probably want an altered Goodwin Champion more than, you know, a pretty rough 1 or 2. grade. So if it's a PSA 2 and it was a really rough 2 versus the authentic one that looks just beautiful, I personally would probably rather have the authentic than the PSA 2. Now, historically in the past, when I've talked about this topic and you guys have asked me about this topic, I've said, well, I don't really want an altered card because it has this, deception attached to the history of it, which I do agree with to a certain extent, but not with a card that's 125 years old. A card that's 125 years old, like that alteration could have happened 100 years ago when people didn't know that was even a thing. So it really, really depends. The Hack Wilson that you mentioned, that's a pretty old card. I mean, we're talking about a pre-war card. It's 90 years old. And, if it was altered, I would probably rather have it than a really rough one, personally. But I might rather have a 2 than the altered one. But again, the whole thing with all of this card stuff is our opinions are always changing. And I'm more open to altered cards, meaning like, having issues that are 125 years old. Whereas anything with a card from the last 40 or 50 years, I just don't have any interest in it if it's been altered. Like, I'm just not interested. So I hope that helps. I think the answer really comes down to it's all in the eye of the beholder. I mean, if the altered card doesn't bother you and you like the looks of it, and when you look at it, it makes you happy, then you should consider buying it. But I think we all have our own threshold of what is and isn't acceptable, just like the same with conditions. Like some people wouldn't do a card that's 95 5 centering, and other people have absolutely no problem with it. And that's sort of the beauty of the whole thing, If we all rooted for the same football team, football season would not be any fun. It would not be that fun. But because we all have different interests, we all have different opinions, we all have different things we like and we don't like and bother us and don't bother us, that's what makes it interesting. We would have nothing to talk about if we all had the same opinion. So just because that's my opinion doesn't make it the right opinion, and it doesn't mean that it should be your opinion. But I would be interested in your guys' opinion. Tell me below where you stand on authentic and authentic altered.
Always interesting to hear your thoughts. Here's a question for you. What are your thoughts on Relic cards featuring game-used jersey swatches or bats of baseball legends? To me, the whole thing is worth so much more than the sum of the parts in this case. You're not actually getting a jersey or a bat. You're getting a small piece of a bat or cloth that means nothing. Who actually buys these? As a collector, I cringe every time I see these because we are losing history, assuming they are actually cutting up genuine articles. At the risk of giving the card companies an idea, would we really buy a piece of a Grail card that has been cut into 1 centimeter square sections? Can you imagine a T206 Wagner or Aaron rookie being chopped up and inserted into a chase card? Hope you enjoyed Strongsville.
I don't think I've been asked this question. I don't think this topic has really come up because, most of what I talk about and the cards that I look at and reference are generally kind of prior 1980. And there aren't any Relic cards from prior 1980, at least not that I know of. I first heard about this, just me, I first heard about Relic cards right around 2002. My brother was buying these cards, and I can't remember the name of the set, but it was all these Yankee Legend cards. I know one of you guys will know, and you'll put it in the comments below. But the whole set, you'd open packs, and it was just like legendary Yankees, and he was putting the set together, and he bought a couple of boxes of it. So it had everything from, Willie Keeler and Casey Stengel and Lou Gehrig, all the way to, Willie Randolph and Greg Nettles and Don Mattingly. And when he opened the box, he opened a pack and he got a Babe Ruth relic. And the Babe Ruth was a game-used bat piece of the game used bat from Babe Ruth. And it wasn't a square one. They used to, now they're all like usually like squares or rectangles. This, they laser cut out the Yankee logo of this relic. Now, the problem with that was, wood has moisture, and as wood dries, it changes. And while they cut it really well, and it was beautiful, it was cut where some of the portions of the Yankee logo were really, really, really narrow. And if I remember correctly, and I think that I do, just over time with the moisture change, part of it kind of cracked and split. So now we have a we have a Babe Ruth bat that got cut up into a bunch of pieces. And then they laser cut it into a logo, which was cool looking, but now it's not sustainable because of changes in moisture. And the card, the relic, is now got issues. Now I haven't seen it in years, but that's how I remember it. The thought of taking a Babe Ruth jersey or hat or bat and putting a saw through it or scissors through it, it makes me kind of ill. It is not something that on its surface I'm personally thinking is cool. And I was always against it, always against it. And then several years ago, maybe 6 or 7 years ago, somebody said, this is a way for people who could never afford a Babe Ruth bat to be able to participate in game-used memorabilia of a legend like a Babe Ruth or a Lou Gehrig or a Ted Williams. And I kind of thought about that, and I was like, that is true. Like, I could never buy a Ty Cobb jersey, game-used jersey, but if I could kind of have a part of one, that could be kind of cool. So it kind of changed my mindset. At that point, I wasn't like for it all of a sudden, but I was like, I understood it. It was like a way for people to participate in collecting game-used memorabilia without actually being able to have to purchase it. Sort of like, I'm never going to be able to buy a beachfront property in Maui, but I might be able to rent one for a week and enjoy it for a moment. So I definitely think that I can see both sides to that one. Now you make the comment about, well, what if they cut up a Honus Wagner card and put pieces of a Honus Wagner card into a card? That had never crossed my mind. That had never crossed my mind. But I thought it was an outstanding analogy. If they cut up a Honus Wagner T206 and put a little tiny piece of it, a centimeter piece of it, in a bunch of cards, is that a good idea or a bad idea? Now, I'm kind of a purist, and it kind of makes me sick to think about. I don't think I would be on board with that. But I'm sure there are some people that would say, I would love to buy a piece of that. So personally, my personal opinion is I'm not really on board with the Relic thing. I also don't know how they prove that they're genuine, but all of that's a whole different thing on whether they're legit or not. I'm not even going to go there. But I think that I understand the perspective of thinking it's okay, but I personally am not necessarily a person who would endorse that idea, but I can kind of live side by side with people who do, if that makes any sense.
Your response to grading autographed cards resonates with me, as I have 15 to 20 show autographed cards, which I have refrained from grading for the same reasons you recited. That is, I don't plan on selling them either, which brings me to this point. Someone in my family will likely be selling them once I'm gone, and I turn 73 next month. In the end, grading and authentication is important even for our long-term PC holdings, because one day someone else will own those cards. Your thoughts? See, I could be long-winded too.
Okay, so Golden Slumber, you know I love you, and you've been a long time subscriber. In fact, you were commenting on my videos after about a month and a half of me posting, if I'm not mistaken, and you have consistently been there with me, and I genuinely appreciate your support. And you're kind of saying, but Greg, you're saying, you know, when we pass away, we want our stuff to be graded because then it's easier on our family. But here you are with autographs saying that you have no interest in getting an autograph authenticated because you were there when it was, you know, autographed. So what do you need authentication for? Why would you want to spend money on that? And my response to calling me out like that is, that's a good point. That's a really good point. It is kind of contradictory, isn't it? It's like, I've been saying for a while, one of the benefits of grading is it makes it easier on your family when they need to liquidate your stuff, because nobody will own anything forever, and eventually everything that we have will be sold, right? But here I am saying, but I'm not going to do that with my autographs. So let me, you know, hold on, I'm up against the wall, right? You're pushing me up against the wall. I'm going to come back and I'm going to respond because it's a great point. I have some autographs that have a pretty decent amount of value, right? I got my Mickey Mantle ball signed in fact, at the same facility, I'm almost positive the same facility I'm doing the card show at this weekend is the same building that I got my Mickey Mantle autograph. I'm almost positive. And I haven't gotten it authenticated. Now, one of the reasons I haven't gotten it authenticated is it's like, do I really want to pay PSA like, I don't know, what is it, $200 or $300 to authenticate a ball that I know was autographed by Mickey Mantle when I know, I was there? Part of me is just like, well, I don't really want to pay for that. I'd rather use that money to buy things for my collection. And a lot of me does feel that way. But to your point, that is a fair point. And then my Ted Williams autograph, it's on a ball, never been authenticated. I mean, when I was getting these balls autographed, this is in like 1989, 1990, I got my Willie McCovey autograph at about that time. And, and I have others too, but I'm just using those examples. There was no authentication. You don't walk off, walk over to the side and then somebody gives you, you pay $10 and they give you a little authentication slip. Like, that wasn't even a thing. That wasn't a thing. That came later. And so why would you do that? Like, of course it's real. I just watched them do it. So I think I'll amend my answer. Okay, you got me up against the wall, right? And I'm going to amend my answer. If the cost of the authentication increases the value by more than the cost of authentication when liquidating it, then you should probably get it authenticated. So I have no idea what like a Ted Williams ball sells for right now, but I'll just say an unauthenticated Ted Williams ball is $500 and an authenticated Ted Williams ball is $800, okay? So if I were to sell this ball, I'd get $500 if it was not authenticated and $800 if it was. If the authentication is worth less than $300, if the added value of the authentication is more than the value of the authentication, then I think that it would make sense to get it authenticated. So my Mike Musina autograph that I got through the mail, and I guess it's somebody commented he charges $10. So if you want a Mike Musina autograph, you find his address, you send a $10 bill in it, and you get your Mike Musina autograph. Now let's say it's $20 to authenticate the Mike Musina autograph. is it gonna be worth $20 more because you got it authenticated? I don't think so. I think you could probably buy an authenticated one online for like $25 and an unauthenticated one online for $15. I don't know. I haven't done the math, but if the added value from the authentication is more than the cost of the authentication, then I would say, yeah, it would make sense financially to get them authenticated. So does that mean I'm gonna run out and get them authenticated? Well, not right now. Not right now, because right now I'm 44 years old. And if I'm 44 years old, I'm not planning on being gone soon. And there are people in my life, in my family's life, where if, something happened to me, they could help with that whole process. But yes, I think at some point I probably will get some of the things authenticated per your question based on what I just went through. So yeah, you kind of called me. You're right. You're right. I stand corrected. You're absolutely right.
Do you think your collecting interests change as you change the collectors you associate with the most?
This is, I think, a very easy answer for me. The answer is yes. 100%. Who you associate with, who you collect around, who you spend time with at shows, it 100% affects what my interests are or what other people's interests are. I'll give you a perfect example. So I got home early Sunday morning. Well, it was not early East Coast time anymore, but it was early West Coast time. So Strongsville, I fly home early Sunday morning. I get home, I unpack a lot of my stuff, and I say, hey, Dad, come on over and check out my pickups. So I have everything laid out on the table. So my dad's sitting there, and he comes over. He lives like, I don't know, 2 miles away. He comes over, he sits down, and he starts looking at each of the cards. And he's looking at the Sammy Baugh cards that I bought, and he's looking at the Rogers Hornsby card that I bought. And he sits and turns to me and he says, the problem with this is when I see this stuff, it makes me want it. It makes me want some of these cards. And he's always been a very, very focused collector. But then he comes over and he goes, man, this 33 Gaudy is pretty darn cool. I think I want some 33 Gaudys. Or I see this, 52 Bowman Sammy Baugh, and I think vintage football cards are really cool. So 100% when you're around it. Now, at the show, I don't have too many caramel cards. I think I have a couple. And, I'm hanging out with Orlando, and Orlando picks up this really nice Walter Johnson caramel card. And I'm like, man, I'm looking at it. And you guys have seen this video. If you haven't seen this video, check out this video. Like, this thing is gorgeous. And then, Darren picks up a really awesome caramel card. And I'm like, this thing is amazing. This is so awesome. If I go back 3 or 4 months, I knew very, very little about some of these, late 20s ice cream cards. The Yinglings and the Tharps and all these. I knew very little. Very, very little. But then I start talking to a friend who's really into them. I mean, he loves them. And he's talking to me about them. He's teaching me about them. And I'm like, all of a sudden, I'm like, yeah, these things are pretty cool. These things are absolutely pretty cool. 3 months ago, I hardly even knew about them. So, yeah, I definitely think if you're watching YouTube channels, if you have a friend who collects, vintage hockey. I mean, vintage hockey cards are cool. I don't have any, nobody I'm friends with collect any, but I'll see them at shows, and honestly, I'll slow down at the case and I'll start to look, and I'm like, I'm not even gonna go there. I was talking to Mike Petty, I was talking to my guy, Mike Petty, and he said, because he left before I picked up my Sammy ball cards. He left Strongsville on Saturday midday. And I picked up those Sammy ball cards at the very end of the day on Saturday. So he wasn't there when I got them. So he watches my video and he sees that I picked up these cards. And he says, man, those vintage football cards are awesome. Like, so far, I haven't gone there. I haven't cracked that can of worms. Like, I haven't started collecting that, thank God, because then I'd be broke from all this other stuff because it's so cool. So it's like, there's no doubt that people that you're friends with and seeing what they collect, as soon as you start looking at it and learning about it, there's a lot of really cool stuff. And there's a lot of really cool stuff that I know nothing about yet. And I know that when I come across it, I'm gonna probably want some. And I know that, that's one of the cool things about a lot of these YouTube channels is a lot of these guys are so super knowledgeable. And they'll talk about different cards, not just in their collection that are for sale, that are for auctions. I posted a link to Blue Jacket Dave Blue Jacket 66's video not that long ago about an REA auction, and he's just teaching about all these different cards. And I mean, it was an unbelievable lesson in rare, like vintage, like pre-war stuff. It was an unbelievable lesson. And by the way, I got to hang out with Dave Summit at the Strongsville show. Could not be a nicer guy. An absolutely awesome guy. So much fun to talk with, so much fun to hang out with. But like, you watch a channel like that and you're like, I didn't know that existed, now I want it. So I gave you imagine that. I gave you the long-winded answer, but that's kind of my response. 100% yes.
I have a question for you. For some background, I'm healthy and in my early 50s, and I've been a set collector since childhood with no break. I find myself really just wanting to collect stars, and the sets just kind of take up my space and will be a nightmare for my family later on. My collection is about 100,000 cards, with about 70,000 of those being unique baseball cards, with complete runs of tops from 1954 and up, complete Fleer runs from the 60s, a complete Heritage run, complete Kellogg's and Hostess runs. I also collect T206, Gaudy, Play Ball, etc. So I've been thinking for some time now that to keep my 70s sets, since they are really what connects with me with my childhood, and then really liquidating all of the commons from the 60s and back, keeping Hall of Famers and significant players. The liquidating all of the sets from the 80s and up, including the Heritage run. I'm thinking of scaling down to, say, 5,000 or so cards. All of the 80s and up are high-grade raw and factory sets. The Heritage sets are raw and high-grade. The 60s sets are upper mid-grade 5s to 7s, each set being consistent. The 54 is about X, 55 VGX, 56 X Mint, 57 is VGX, 58 is X, and 59 is X plus. Now finally to my question. How would you go about liquidating these? Example like Greg Morris for the higher grade 50s and 60s commons, ComC, organize and price for card show inventory, or make starter sets for eBay. I'm thinking individual complete set listings for the Heritage sets. But what do you think? A little more background. I am local to DFW and often set up at the Dallas Card Show as a dealer with my 10-year-old son, and I have an eBay store as a top-rated seller. I work a full-time job and definitely don't want to be listing $5 or less cards. The funds for the sale of the trim down would basically be used to obtain cards that I have always wanted. Example, Plain Day, Ruth, Cobb, Gehrig, etc. Sorry about the long question, but I think most of that information is needed for someone to help answer. Really, I want to maximize the value over some months or even a year or so, not just bundle up for quick cash outs. Thank you for all the great content and all the best.
Okay. You know, this is one of those questions. There's certainly not a right answer. There's not one strategy that is the only good strategy. There's a lot of ways that this could be done to liquidate this volume and volume and volume. That's so many cards. It would be very, very difficult to say that there's only one way to do it. You brought up a lot of the things that I would have said. I mean, the thing about Greg Morris cards is there are so many set builders and minor star collectors and people who love raw ungraded cards that just are subscribed to their channel, and any new listings and any new postings, it goes over their eyes. So they kind of have a very captive audience of people who want sharp, vintage, ungraded stuff. And because they have that audience so captive, I think the cost of going through them is at least as much as what they cost. Like, so you're gonna get more for your cards than what they cost to do it for you. So I think it's a win-win. And, you know, when I was on the way to the airport on Thursday night last week for Strongsville, you know, I was listening to Mike Moynihan's channel, and, you know, he was having a discussion and they were talking about exactly this. And they were saying, you know, it's in a lot of cases, it's like they might get you an extra $1 for a card and they're gonna cost you 40 cents to sell it. So you got an extra net 60 cents. So any sort of super sharp stuff, minor star stuff, I think Greg Morris is a really good way to do it, because it's selling them one by one in front of an audience of people who that's what they want, and you don't have to mess with it. So I think that's a great option. Another thing I'll say about Strongsville is, you know, I know a lot of us showed, you know, a lot of the cases, you know, at the show. And, you know, when I'm showing video, I'm going over the showcases, because that's a lot of the stuff that we don't normally see. But I can tell you that there were stacks and stacks and stacks of other things. And one of the things is there were a couple of tables. I think one of them was Stan's vintage cards. And Stan had just binders and binders and binders of like every year you could think of, just for set builders. And the whole show, there were 4 or 5 tables, or 4 or 5 chairs that were around these couple of tables where he had the binders, and they were just flipping through, looking at their lists, pulling out cards. I mean, there are more set builders out there than I realized, and I saw it in front of me at Strongsville. And so there is a demand for that stuff if you're at the right place. And I mean, I was going through the 73 Topps cards because I wanted to find the cards from the cartoons that I was gifted, and it was like he had like 2 of every single one. And so there's definitely a demand for, you know, mid to high grade ungraded commons from all of the years that you're describing. So does that mean that you should go to the Dallas Card Show and set up and have a bunch of binders with all that stuff? Maybe do that a couple of times. And then the stuff that you don't sell, then send that to Greg Morris Cards. I don't know. You know, or maybe when you go to a big show, find Stan and go, hey, what do you pay for this type of stuff? Because he's got binders of it. It's a big part of his business. So there is a demand, and like you said, you don't want to just sell it too much in bulk, because then you're not going to get as much out of it. I mean, what a lot of dealers do is they buy that stuff in bulk, because by piecing it out, there's so much more added value. I don't have a good recommendation. I don't, because there's not a right answer. But I think the minor stars, probably Greg Morris Cards. The bigger cards I would grade, and then I would probably try to sell myself. You know, whether it be to a dealer who pays a high percentage like Ash does, or it be if you're setting up at the Dallas Card Show anyway, putting them out in your showcases, selling them on eBay. But I do totally agree that if it's not a hurry, like it sounds like you're saying, that taking your time and piecing it out and not just doing bulk lot of 100 commons is how you're going to get the most for your money. Is if you're patient. It will create a lot more work that way, but if the money is more important than the work, if the time is not the concern, then I think that that's probably the way that you're going to come out the most ahead. So I don't really feel like I brought too much to the table in this particular comment, you know, but that's where I'm at with it. I hope it's at least somewhat helpful. And hey, guys, seriously, this last week, I had 5 questions. You just heard them. I just had 5. So if you have a question, it's not like it's going into a pile of 100 questions, right? Sometimes there's just a few questions. And if you ask a question once and I don't use it, again, don't just give up on me. Take a second and go, I'm going to resubmit it the following week, because it just might mean that week I had, 6 questions and I picked 5. So don't hesitate to ask a question below. Anything about Strongsville, anything about how it changes my perspective or the experience, anything about cards at all. Again, because I'm not giving right or wrong answers. Well, they might all be wrong, but I'm not giving like this is the only way answers. I'm just giving my opinion, my perspective, and it is a lot of fun to share my thoughts. And I love to hear what everybody's interested in hearing about.